therapist Kristen Jacobson.
Hey everyone, I'm Kristen, the anxiety therapist, and today I want to talk about how to handle uncertainty without losing your mind. So, uncertainty is pretty much a hallmark of anxiety. It's that uncomfortable space where your brain really likes to spiral. And if you've ever found yourself awake at 3 a.m., mentally rehearsing all of these worst case scenarios, then this video is definitely for you. But why does uncertainty feel like this psychological itch that we just can't seem to scratch? And more importantly, what can we actually do about it? Well, let's start by talking about why uncertainty can feel like a threat. At its core, anxiety is your brain's alarm system, right? It's designed to keep you safe. And the problem is that alarm system isn't exactly sophisticated. So it can't really differentiate between an actual threat, like a bear chasing you through the woods, and an ambiguous one, like waiting to hear back after a job interview. So when we're talking about neuroscience, this uncertainty activates the amygdala. And this is the part of the brain that's responsible for processing fear and keeping us safe. So when the amygdala gets fired up, it then triggers another part of our brain, the hypothalamus, to release those stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. So this is great if you need to outrun a bear, but it's not so helpful when you're just trying to survive your inbox. And studies have shown that the brain actually prefers predictability because it reduces the cognitive load, right? When things are certain, your brain can sort of switch into autopilot. But when you don't know what's coming next, your brain can stay in this hypervigilant state, scanning for threats that may or may not actually exist. And this heightened state of alertness can be really mentally exhausting and physically draining. And research also suggests that people often find uncertainty more stressful than actually knowing something bad is definitely going to happen. So think about it. Knowing you're going to have a tough day at work feels different because you can sort of brace yourself for that. You know what's coming versus not knowing what's waiting for you. So interestingly, research suggests that we often find uncertainty more stressful than actually knowing something bad is definitely going to happen. So think about it. Knowing you're going to have a tough day at work feels different because you sort of know what you're walking into, right? You can sort of mentally and emotionally prepare versus not knowing what's waiting for you. So your brain really hates the what ifs more than those oh no's. But the real culprit is intolerance of uncertainty. This is a psychological trait that basically means I hate not knowing what's going to happen. And people with high IU experience distress and anxiety when faced with unknown outcomes or gaps in information. So this isn't just a personality quirk, it's what we call a cognitive bias. So what happens with anxiety is your brain fills in the blanks with these worst case scenarios because it feels more comfortable to prepare for all of those possible disasters than risk being caught off guard. But ironically, this mental rehearsal, it doesn't actually make you feel more prepared. It just keeps the anxiety loop running and makes you think that there's actually something to be preparing for or for feeling anxious about, that something bad will actually happen. So for example, somebody with high IU, they might spend hours overthinking a text message that hasn't been replied to. And so their brain might go from rationally thinking, maybe that person is busy, to then spiraling and thinking, oh, they must be mad at me. And so the discomfort of not knowing is what fuels the anxiety, and then it creates this cycle that feels really hard to break. And so the paradox is the more you try to control uncertainty, the more anxious you become. So it's sort of like quicksand. Struggling actually makes you sink faster. And this is because attempts to control the uncontrollable often backfire. And then this reinforces the belief that uncertainty is dangerous. So consider this. If you've ever double checked an email for typos and then sent it and then reopened it to check it again, that urge to just make sure is your brain seeking certainty. But does it actually reduce your anxiety? Probably not. It just kind of keeps you stuck in this cycle of checking and worrying, not to mention wasting a whole lot of time. So the paradox is that seeking absolute certainty is just an impossible task, right? Life doesn't come with guarantees, and so the pursuit of them can leave you feeling more anxious, not less, right? We can't predict the future, no matter how hard we try or how much we try to prepare for it. So just accepting that some degree of uncertainty is part of life can be surprisingly freeing, but it can be really, really hard to do. So I'm going to give you guys some tips that you can start with, because uncertainty is just baked into the human experience. And so we can't eliminate it, but there are some things that we can do to change how we respond to it. The first is name it to tame it. So acknowledging when you're feeling anxious because of uncertainty can be helpful. So labeling the emotion activates the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational and logical part of our brain. And then this helps regulate the amygdala's freakouts, right? That part that senses fear. So simply saying something like, I'm feeling anxious because I don't know what's going to happen, can create a small but powerful shift. Number 2 is to shift from outcome to process. So instead of obsessing over things you can't control, which is the outcome, like let's say whether you're going to get that job, you want to focus on what you can control, like preparing for the interview. So this redirects your brain's energy from excessive worrying to more productive action with what you can control. Number 3 is practice exposure to uncertainty. So this might sound a little counterintuitive, but intentionally putting yourself in uncertain situations can actually help you build tolerance over time. So start small, let an email sit in your inbox without responding immediately, or make a decision without over-researching every option so that you feel like you're making the right choice. The goal isn't to eliminate that discomfort, but to prove to yourself that you can trust yourself to handle whatever happens. Number 4 is mindfulness. So this is sort of like your brain's off switch. And practices like deep breathing or meditation can really help calm the amygdala, again, that fear response, and reduce our stress. So you don't need to become some sort of Zen master. Even a few minutes of just focused breathing can help. And what mindfulness does is it teaches you to observe your thoughts without judgment. And when you notice your brain spinning out with those what if scenarios, you can acknowledge them without getting caught up in them. So it's sort of like sitting on a bench at the train station and watching a train pass through instead of boarding it and going along for the ride. You can do the same thing with your thoughts. You can kind of observe them, watch them pass through, and emotions, right? Emotions will pass through if you allow them, and you're not clinging to them. You're not sort of attaching yourself to them. You're just observing them. Number 5 is to reframe the narrative. So uncertainty isn't inherently bad, right? It's part of our human experience. It's just uncomfortable. And so sometimes it can even lead to growth. So reframing uncertainty as more of an opportunity rather than a threat can change your emotional response. So instead of thinking, I don't know what will happen, maybe try saying, I'm curious to see how this unfolds. And this helps build resilience over time. Another helpful reframe is that uncertainty means possibilities. So if you don't know how something will turn out, it could just as easily turn out well as poorly, right? Your brain tends to focus on the negative possibilities, but there's no reason to assume that they're more likely than the positive ones. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term self-fulfilling prophecy, but this is when we tend to assume something negative will happen. And so we subconsciously alter the way we think, feel, or behave in a certain situation that kind of creates that negative outcome that we're assuming. So we really want to make sure that we're not doing ourselves even more harm by causing things to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then finally, you want to practice self-compassion. So anxiety about uncertainty isn't a personal failing. It's just part of how the human brain is wired. And when we struggle with anxiety, we just experience that distress over uncertainty in overdrive, right? So instead of beating yourself up, you want to practice self-compassion and just being kind to yourself. Remind yourself that it's okay to feel uneasy when things are unclear. And this reduces the secondary layer of stress that tends to come from judging yourself for feeling anxiety in the first place, which a lot of people do. And you might not even be aware of that. So uncertainty is an unavoidable part of life, but the anxiety that accompanies it can be alleviated, right? That can be avoided in a way. And by understanding how our brain works and why uncertainty triggers anxiety, we can start to shift our relationship with it. So remember, your brain is wired to crave certainty, but that doesn't mean you have to let it run the show. You can learn to sit with that discomfort, challenge your need for control, and even find a little peace in the not knowing. And hey, if nothing else, at least you know why your brain is being overdramatic. That's progress, right? So I would love to hear about your experiences with uncertainty. How do you cope with it? Do you feel like it's something that is really challenging for you? So leave a comment, or if you have a question, feel free to reach out, and I will see you all next week.